Hello and welcome back to the Social Matters podcast. We are three social workers talking about social matters. Natty! Social matters. Hi, I'm Fran.
Hi, I'm Eugene.
Hi, I'm Nadia.
I always feel that I'd never want to chat too much when we've got a guest because it feels really strange that we're just sort of having this chat and the three of us. So we actually have a special guest today. So I'm going to introduce them so we can start the conversation. Today we have Louise Oliver from the National Childbirth Trust, whose role is the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Lead.
That's right.
Excellent. So excited to have you here today to have the conversation about the work that you do. So I suppose just to kick us off, Louise, is it all right if you tell the listeners, first of all, a bit about NCT, the work that they do, and then your role specifically within that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here. So NCT, a lot of people know NCT as an organisation that delivers antenatal education, but actually NCT is a charity and we run a whole load of free to access services for families. So we are there to support people as they become parents, so focusing on the period of pregnancy, birth and the early postnatal period. And we run things all over the UK, so we're in each of the different areas, different countries, and we run things such as feeding support groups. We also have commission services, so things where we train peer supporters to deliver support. We've got a project called Parents in Mind, which is focused on postnatal mental health and also mental health for dads and partners as well. And we also have an infant feeding line, so anyone can call that. That's open 365 days a year, which is amazing. Wow. So you can call up if you've got questions, worries, if you just want to have a cry. It's so nice to do that. And then there are branch networks where parents come together and run different events. So, for example, a Nearly New sale where they bring all the old kids stuff that they've outgrown or toys they no longer need, and they can sell them on, and people can get a bargain. It's good for the environment, it recycles, and then it also helps the charity too. So there's quite a lot of different things that we do as an organisation. And we have our staff, we have lots of volunteers who help make all of that happen, and we also have practitioners who we've trained to be able to deliver services. So trying not to leave anything out there, probably have, so sorry if I have, but that's sort of an overview of the work we do. And that's the work we do directly with parents and families, and we also do campaigning in the maternity space, so campaigning on things that are really important to try and improve care, reduce disparities, the list goes on, so quite a lot.
Yeah.
Just to say, when I was pregnant and, in the first up until now, my daughter was nearly 5 years old. We my husband and I joined an NCT group, and it's just so amazing to hear the breadth and the scope of what NCT does. Because in my mind, it was just these, pre-birth and then post-birth kind of support groups. But it was honestly invaluable in terms, we kind of created a little WhatsApp group, and then at 3 a.m. when something was going down, we'd just be messaging, this is happening with my baby, what's going on, what are people's experiences. And it was just such a helpful kind of support group to see me through the first year / 5 years of my baby's life. It's honestly such an incredible kind of support team. But yeah, it's just so amazing to hear all of the other things that kind of NCT offer and do as well.
And that's the beauty of it, is sort of with our antenatal courses or with any of our services. So if you're attending a group, for example, you can meet other parents who have a baby maybe a similar age or a bit older or younger than yours. It's always nice to meet a parent with a child a bit older, because you can see they survived this terrible bit that you're going through. So if you are having zero sleep, you're like, well, their baby's 4 months older, so it is possible, I keep going. But also it gives you people who have that understanding, so that peer network. And because people have babies at all different stages, it might be that you're having a baby and none of your friends or family are having a baby, so you can feel isolated. So that bringing together of for parents in the community, I think is so valuable.
Yeah.
I've certainly appreciated it.
And then that's like,
Yeah.
you saying about like part of the work being, so, you know, trying to address some of the disparities, and I suppose that might be where your specific role comes in. What kind of, where does your role sit within all of the breadth of the holistic work that they do?
Well, there's a bit of a running joke that I am everywhere. So my manager often says I've got tentacles in every area of the organisation, and that's right, because it has the inclusion work has to be everywhere. You can't just work in one space and neglect another. But interestingly, NCT historically hasn't really done a lot in this area, internally certainly, and the work that I look at is a lot of the focus is internal, so we need to be safe for parents.
Yeah.
Like, we can't look at making a service accessible, for example, and then the people running the service have got no idea how to engage with people who perhaps have different accessibility needs or come from different backgrounds. So a lot of work has been internal, and I get involved in all sorts of beautiful things, and that's one thing I like about my job, is that I can hop around. I get to see stuff that's going on all over the place, and play a part in ensuring that that becomes something that is for every parent, which is part of our recent strategy, is for every parent strategy. So it's all about bringing that to life and ensuring that we are there for every parent and that anyone can access our services. It's a massive task though. NCT's been around for a long time. It was created by white middle class women, and so by default it's designed for white middle class women, and there's a whole lot of stuff to undo amongst that. But at its core, what NCT offers and what it believes in is something I think is so valuable, not just for parents and babies, but actually for society. And that's what I want to see sort of be something that anyone can access to make that difference on a wider scale.
So you're trying to make the kind of maternity system, you're trying to make change in the maternity system and like, make it sort of inclusive and equitable for everyone. How is that sort of happening within NCT?
So, I mean, as on our campaigning front, which is more external, we are involved in all different spaces, different networks, where we recently put forward a call for sort of better access to interpreter services, saying that the government and NHS need to address the disparities in maternity care, and call for lots of changes there. Internally, it's really about helping everyone in our community to understand that people are different, people have different challenges, and so people need different approaches. When I came into post, the approach that I decided to take was an organisation-wide allyship programme. And the reason I went for allyship is because it's not just about doing the education around how to be inclusive, how to be supportive of everyone. It's understanding what that looks like in practice, what action and responsibility we have as individuals to go and do that work every day. And my aim is for my job not to be needed to exist anymore, because actually everybody is doing that work just as a standard, and so it's not needed. So we had the allyship programme, and that involves a variety of different things. So short videos about things such as bias, stereotypes, microaggressions, little tips on sort of, so you've got the education bit about what are these things, and then how they might show up, and what does this look like? How can you challenge that? What can you do about that? And then I also run allyship support spaces. So they're spaces where anyone in the organisation can come along and we'll talk about anything. It might be something that was spoken about around the dinner table. A family member said something inappropriate, they weren't sure how to approach it. And we then look at, okay, so what are the challenges here? What can we do about it, and what might you do next time? So it's all about learning, but no pressure for people to feel they might say the wrong word, or it's because I think that's really important. And if people can get the concept of being an ally, then the application to different groups is easy. In sort of at its core, allyship is about the internal work that you have to do as an individual. The learning and understanding of different communities is something that anybody can do. But to be an ally to those communities, you really have to be able to recognise your own biases and the things that have influenced you and the practices that you're doing. Maybe you've never even thought about questioning it. You've just always done it that way, but maybe we need to stop and think, can we do it a different way? So that's where the allyship comes in internally. And then we've done lots of other things. We've launched an internal language guide, which is easy to understand, clearly states sort of the language we would like our community to avoid, the language we prefer them to use, and then the reasons why, because people need to understand the why. Otherwise it just becomes they want us to say this now. So that understanding is important too. But the stacks of work, I could probably talk about it all day, because there is a lot that's going on. But really trying to make sure that all the projects that we work on across the organisation have inclusion running right the way through it. So I'm just there as a little reminder for people.
It sounds like for the work you do is more than a little reminder. It's a big reminder, constant reminder. But I like that idea of allyship, because we all need allies at one point or the other. We can all use an ally, and I think you say it now when we do training, is that you can be an ally to so many different people, and that idea of trying to create a community that works for everyone is so important in life, but sounds like the work that you do in NCT. I'm particularly enjoying listening to this you speak, because I think when something is not on your radar, you don't know much about it. So I haven't got children, and I no longer work as a frontline social worker. So as I'm hearing you speak about the work of the NCT and you talk about your experience from being a mum, I'm like, I just realised how much is not on my radar. But then hearing the work that is done, and especially around diversity and inclusion, I'm like, this is resonating with me. Well, not resonating, but it's appealing to me a lot. So I appreciate it. So we know that the NCT has been around for almost 70 years. Is it next year? You said it's the 70th year?
Next year I think is our 70th anniversary.
What jubilee is that? Is that like a silver jubilee? I don't know.
No. Might.
No. Silver's like 25. It's like ruby. It must be like
platinum. Diamonds or something.
And that, which is a long time, and given our own experience in this field and this work, we know that it can be challenging. So what are some of the barriers that you face in trying to really get the work that you do off the ground and impacting?
The barriers are what they are everywhere, and I think if you're an organisation that has been around for a long time, and as I said earlier, you are created by, and essentially by default, for white middle class people, all of the structures and the systems within it haven't really thought about anyone that falls outside of that. And so the biggest barriers really are the structural and systemic change and shift that's needed. People are usually quite, in my experience, people are actually quite easy in comparison, because a lot of the structural change, a lot of it requires things such as finance, and as a charity, funding is always really tricky. The landscape's been really challenging since COVID as well. So when you want things to be able to improve understanding your organisation, or delivering education, or whatever it might be, it's the cost that's associated with that. And also having the capacity and the time, because you've got your business as usual. Everyone has to keep doing their day job. So when you want to change something quite big, that can be a bit of a barrier and tricky. And I suppose for me personally, a barrier is my impatience, because I'm a bit like, this is important, we need to do it now. The barriers really are largely the things that have been fixed for a very long time, and the change that comes with when you have a change of something that's been around a long time, that can be tricky for the people in the organisation as well. But I've largely found that the majority of our community are really on board with the inclusion work and the direction we're going in. So that is one of the most critical pieces. But yeah, the barriers are really around the structures and the money.
Yeah. But it's so important that you've got people who are on board, because I don't know where this episode's coming out. So I would say we previously done, or we're going to do, an episode about resistance and reluctance, working with resistance and reluctance. And I think it can be a huge difference, a huge weight off your shoulder, where the audience you're working with are receptive to the ideas, but very different if there is resistance and reluctance to change. Because if a system is designed to work for you as an individual, then why would you want to change that? But I think people do have to let go of something a little bit in order to create an environment that is more inclusive and for everyone. So it's great that people are on board at NCT, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think the other challenge we have as well is the external. So that what's happening in the media and in politics, that has such an influence on the people in your organisation and their thoughts and their approaches to things. We're quite lucky in a sense, because the people that are involved at NCT are passionate about the work we do. And I always find that if you can explain to people the why behind it, then quite often it brings them along a lot easier. What people find difficult is when you try and say, we need to do this, and you don't explain that why. Given the disparities that we have in maternity at the moment, it's very easy to say, this is why why we need to do this. But it is tricky, and there's definitely that external influence that plays a part in it and can make it more challenging at times. And there's a lot of whataboutery is what's commonly referred to, so it's difficult. But if you work from the basis of, if we support this group of people, so for example, we have the approach of, if we can become anti-racist, if we can work to eradicate racism and have equity on that level, it actually raises standards for everyone else as well. So it's about showing people we're not, as you said, not taking away from you. It's not pie. Like, you don't get less pie because we're giving people what they need. And it also demonstrating that things weren't fair in the first place. But that can be hard as well when people learn that they're benefiting, or they have benefited from the way society and things are set up. And one of the things that we're really big on is supporting people. So if we have an education session, and we do this with our students, we have an anti-discriminatory practice module. So a whole module students have to do looking at being anti-discriminatory. And for those sessions, and also for the allyship topic-based sessions, where we know that it can be quite tricky, we always have a space where people can step out if they need to. People can come and talk things out and be heard, and have a space where they can work through their feelings, because sometimes people are shocked when they realise, wow, I didn't know that I thought like that. So it's also holding people, because it isn't easy, this work.
Not at all.
Sounds like you are doing such great work, and I suppose I just want to name that. And I loved your sort of analogy at the beginning, or description from colleagues, of being this octopus. But octopus have about 10, 12 brains, and you clearly have thought of all of the angles. And I think it's so helpful and relevant to other organisations and the work they do, because it feels like you're covering every base. And actually, for inclusion work to be meaningful, it needs to be everywhere. But you've also thought about the impact. And I say this as a white person, because some of the stuff you're talking about is that sort of white privilege, isn't it? Of sort of, oh shit, I've benefited from these structures, and sometimes the impact of that. And as you said, intersectionally, white middle class women who it's founded for. And that's an idea I have of NCT, of who it might be for. And as a queer person, or some of my marginalised friends, I don't think they necessarily think it's for them. So I think, or historically, because I think it's the messaging, isn't it? So great work that you're doing to think about the importance of that space for everybody. But yeah, just hearing about your work, and I really like the allyship space. so that it's not just a one-off. Like actually people can bring that like, oh, this is a dilemma, let's think through that. So love that idea, and I think so many organisations could benefit from that, not it being a one-off, here's allyship, what you could do, but let's keep allyship alive. So I mean, you're clearly doing loads of great stuff, but what would you say, you might not be able to quantify it in one, but what would you say are some of your biggest wins in the work that you've been doing?
That's really difficult for me to, and I've thought about this for quite some time. And it's hard because actually I feel like that every win is a big win. I feel like every time that someone says to me, oh, I've changed this, or I was going to do that and now I'm going to do this. People sometimes come to the sessions and say, oh, I was having a conversation the other day and what we looked at in that session has sprung to mind, and now this person is going to do that because we had this conversation. So seeing that play out and seeing that being brought to life, I think the biggest win for me is literally, I can't quantify it to one thing. It is just seeing that play out and seeing the people embrace it, seeing our community go out there. I love reading feedback from parents who sometimes we get feedback like, I didn't think NCT would be inclusive because we're part of the LGBTQIA plus community, and I was pleasantly surprised. Like they had inclusive language, and I didn't feel othered, and so seeing the fruits of that work, and I really believe if we can celebrate every change as a big win, that helps keep us going as well, instead of people thinking, oh, this isn't enough. But every little thing is a move in the right direction.
I love that. We sometimes say one conversation at a time, and I think you're showing that, you know, those little interactions that your community are having with parents and carers is massive. So lovely.
Yeah, it's hard. So we live in a time where people want to measure everything. They want to quantify it specifically. And this work is really difficult to measure. And I suppose goes back a bit to the barriers that you mentioned earlier. That perception, that external perception of our organisation, of being a white middle class organisation, is a big barrier, but that's going to take time for us to change. I also believe, and this is something we've been speaking about quite recently, that we also as an organisation need to behave in a way that is an ally. And so it would be really easy for us to sort of sit there and say, okay, we're going to do this for this group of people and this for that group of people. But actually we need to recognise our role, and that there are other organisations that perhaps are better suited to deliver that. And it would be wrong for us to do it just because we can, just because maybe we've got more capacity, more finance, more ability to do that. When actually a lot of the work that's been done by other organisations is so valuable, more accessible for communities, and it's doing great work. So we, as an organisation, have been practising allyship and supporting smaller organisations, large organisations, like we support others in this space without the expectation of it being about us looking really good, and I like that because whilst I want us to all be open and accessible to everyone, I also recognise that it's impossible to be that in some ways. Being more inclusive doesn't automatically mean you'll get a lot of different people through the doors. Some people want to be with specific groups, with specific communities, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong, but it also doesn't mean you shouldn't do the work. So I think it's about having that realistic understanding of the complexity of people. And
yeah, for sure. Like you speaking about the sort of complexity of people, and also the complexity of the work as well. You know, it is about, you're talking a lot about change, and change is hard. Even when people want change can be really difficult. And just thinking about your role as, you know, equality, diversity and inclusion lead in an organisation that's been established for so long, the work must be hard sometimes. And how do you kind of take care of your own sort of like well-being and yourself in the work?
So I'm lucky in that I'm really well supported. So I have access to external supervision, someone that I chose, and I can access that when I need to, which is helpful. Sometimes it can be difficult in that moment when you're hearing or reading something and you think, oh, this is really not what I want to be reading. I'm really sad this has happened, or someone's left feeling this way. Or maybe if you're trying to progress something, it's just not happening or it's not working. And there definitely been days when I've thought, oh, this is just really hard. But I'm a bit unusual, perhaps, in that it doesn't generally wear me down, even when it's something that affects me as as someone who has a protected characteristic. What I find is that if I see a problem, if there's a challenge, it gives me a fuel to want to go and do something about it. So if someone comes to me and says they've had a poor experience, or they've realised that we're doing something that's inequitable, whatever it might be, instead of me feeling downtrodden about that and it affecting me on that in personal level, it just fuels the fire to go forwards. And I think some of that is about my life course, and just having to, no one's going to come and save you. Have a cry about it. Now, come on, what are you going to do? And I think that means that I don't, whilst I'm affected, I don't necessarily need something specific to help me through those difficult times, because the work is what helps me get through. So okay, I'm going to stop this from happening again. We're going to change things. We're going to do something different. We're going to support this person. And that's what helps me to feel better about it, which I think is a bit unusual, because a lot of people always talk about self-care and going off here and there. No, I just want to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Then I can feel better.
Yeah. But it's nice to hear you talk about that, because I think in this work, I think a lot of people in this field, like their story of why they continue in this field when it becomes hard is always connected with life experience, or experience connected to protected characteristics or upbringing, and that being the kind of adding to the fuel that drives. So when I'm listening to you speak, I'm like, yeah, my story is similar in the sense of life experiences that fuels it. So it's really nice to hear that. But yeah, it can make the work a lot tougher as well. I was going to say a line, we always say this line. Can't believe we're at the end. Yeah, we're at the end. Oh no, but thank you. I'm sitting here just like really absorbing what you're saying. It's been really, really lovely to hear what you've been talking about, Louise. And I'm going to take a lot of what you've said to my friends who are engaged with the NCT. But we've come to almost to the end. We've got one more question for you, and we like to end on a question that kind of propels us a bit into the future. So if we were to propel ourselves 10 years into the future, and the work you're doing was having the impact that you wanted it to have, what do you think would be different? What change do you think we would have seen within the NCT?
So everything that I want's happened. I think in some respects it would be everything as it is at the moment. There's always room for more if need be. But in a way, as I mentioned earlier, where anyone can access it and everyone is welcomed and respected, celebrated, understood, and they can be their whole authentic selves. My role wouldn't exist, because it would just be what we're doing. And maybe I could do something different, which but probably actually just doing something very similar. Like, right, where's the next challenge? And I think in some respects, I'd like to hope that the work we're doing internally as an organisation would have an impact on the wider society, and actually a number of our services might not be as needed as they currently are. So parents, yes, they still need to connect. Yes, they'll still need support, but not because of the way that things function, but because it's just a genuine need for support, or they're feeling vulnerable or challenged at that moment. Because a lot of what parents go through now is actually the result of services, the way they work, access to services, lack of services, not being listened to, not being heard. So it would be really nice if we could just focus on what parents want and need in those moments and throw everything into that without also having to go out there and say, this is not okay, we need to change this. So yeah, I think it would, and of course I'd love for us to be a more diverse organisation as a result of that, all the things that come with being an organisation that welcomes everybody. I'd just like to see that reflected in our community and what we offer.
Love that. Thank you very much, Louise.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and honour to listen to the work that you do, and particularly kind of your work within NCT. So keep knocking it. Right. So we've come to the end, but thank you. We have been 3 social workers talking to Louise Oliver from NCT, National Childbirth Trust. You can follow us on Instagram @Matters Podcast. You can follow us on LinkedIn @Social Matters. Follow, links, subscribe. Also, we have a YouTube channel, The Social Matters Podcast. Excellent. It's taken me 25 minutes to say these words I've been saying for 7 years. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.